conversation. Stuart Agnew was with Prince Charles in the same class for 5 years at the so-called dreaded Gordonston. Yeah. Stuart, welcome.
Well, first of all, I just want to apologise for listeners for not being in black. Coming from Norfolk, we're celebrating the Queen's reign. We're not all dressed in black like everybody else is here. It's no sign of disrespect at all. It really isn't.
We'll accept that. When you went to Gordonston, what was it really like?
Oh, it was grim. It really was. And I was in a house as a new boy 3 miles from the school. It was that awful winter of 62, 63. We never saw what the countryside looked like until early March. It was frost and snow. We all had to wear shorts, everybody. You weren't allowed to wear anything else. We had to cycle there. Sunday nights we had to cycle to chapel. We hated that. I really loathed that first year.
So in some ways the Crown's quite accurate in showing that it was a tough place to be. But there you were, a very small class, and you were with him all the way through that school experience. How did he cope with it all?
Oh, I really admired him at school. Because so much was expected from him. You see, he was expected to be able to sing in the choir and sing a solo. He was expected to master a musical instrument, perhaps play a solo at that. He was expected to play the lead part in a Shakespeare play, and he did. He was expected to do well academically, and he tried really hard. And he couldn't slack off the way several of us did. He just couldn't. And that business in the Crown, apparently, of him bunking off a cross-country run, rubbish. He never, ever would have done that. And whatever I think about some of his views now, I would want to put it right that at Gordonston he tried hard at everything.
Yeah, and you were saying earlier on that, you know, when you were chatting to him in private once...
yes.
And yet, when the rest of the boys arrived, there
were only 8 of us doing A-level history. And I walked into the class one day. He was the only person there. He took the opportunity to ask me about pheasant shooting and gamekeeping and all that sort of thing, because he would go to Sandringham in the Christmas holidays, be given a gun, pheasants and partridges would come all over him. He didn't really understand what it was all about, so he asked me as a Norfolk farmer. So I started to talk to him about it, but then somebody else came in, and my immediate reaction was to stop talking and walk away from him. I didn't want to be seen sucking up to Prince Charles, and I tell that story against myself, but everyone was like that. And it must have been awful for him. But in the end, they sent some aristocrats to the school, especially to be friends for him.
So he had a very tough time.
Oh, yes, definitely. But he tried hard, though.
And a quick little story, Stuart, you told me that you got into a bit of trouble and you had to sort of own up to him a few years later.
Oh, 25 years later, I was driving down a green lane in a little village called Bircham near Sandringham. Towards me was coming this individual in a pale-coloured raincoat with some little terrier dogs in front of him. He was holding a plastic bin liner and picking up rubbish and putting it in. Oh, strange chap. I was going very slowly, looking at my sheep, the other side of the hedge. I drew level with him. He was trying to avoid eye contact with me. And as I went past, I looked up. I know who you are. And I went on for a few more yards, and I thought, no, how often do I see an old Gordonston boy on a green lane? Banged the Land Rover into reverse, went back, shoved my head out of the window, said, "It's Stuart Agnew from Gordonston, you remember me?" And he said, "Yes, I do." And he was very careful. He looked in the Land Rover, wondering if there were any press in there, because it was a difficult time for him then, early 90s with Diana and everything. Anyway, I started to joke to him, imitated his housemaster. We chatted about people at the school. And then I said, "Look, I've got to come clean about something that happened at the school in our last year. And I promised myself if I ever saw you again, I would come clean and tell you about it." And one day, when I was a senior at the school in my last year, I walked into the changing room there and opened the door, the dungeons it was called, and a piece of bread smothered in margarine and jam on somebody's hand went straight into my face. And it was a new boy called Baker. And what was he? I was so angry. I just shoved this boy. He was very tall for his age, but very light and spindly. He went tottering backwards, couldn't keep his balance, and his head smashed into the wall at the far end, wedged between 2 big clothes pegs. And I thought, I'm going to clean my face. I'll deal with you later. Well, Prince Charles walked through the door that I'd walked through only seconds later. What did he see but this blubbering boy Baker stuck between the clothes pegs with blood pouring out of his nose? And he said, "Who did this to you?" "Agnew, Prince Charles." I thought, my God, I could hear all this. Charles couldn't see me. I was hiding behind the door. I thought I could be in real trouble here, bullying. Just at that minute, my brother Jim, also a new boy, appeared from another changing room off to the left. Charles looked at him and said, "What's your name?" "Agnew, Prince Charles." "I am giving you 2 hours penalty drill. If you were an older boy and had done that to him, I would have sent you to the headmaster. Don't you ever do that again." Charles then got Baker off the hooks and led the boy blubbering up to the sanatorium. Well, I heard all this. Jim was still there, wondering what on earth was going on. I said, look, Jim, please do the punishment. I did this to Baker. Look, I will give you 20 quid to do the punishment. We'd all been given 100 quid by our grandmother, us boys. And 20 quid, then, you imagine a farm worker's weekly wage, £12. It was a big sum of money. Anyway, Charles did enter the punishment in the book. Jim did do the punishment, I paid him the money, and Baker appeared to recover. So I recalled all that to Charles in this lane at Bircham. He said, yes, he said, I do remember that. It was, I always thought there was something fishy about it. It was very, very gruesome. Well, I dined out on that.
So you owned up all those years later?
Yeah, I owned up. But then there was a sequel. A few years later, I was asked shooting. Late Charles found. He said there's going to be a few Gordonson boys there, Stuart. Well, I turned up. They were a bit younger than me. It seemed I didn't know them. Anyway, I told this story again about Charles and everything in the at little drinks break. And at the end of it, one of the other guns, one of the other chaps there, stood up and said, Stuart, I have to tell you, I am Baker. So he shook hands, very sorry. And I said to him, why on earth did you do that as a third former? Did you do that to a sixth former? He said, Stuart, I wasn't expecting you. I was expecting your brother Jim.
There you
That
are.
is all true.
So, Charles, it was a difficult time for him, but is he going to make a good king, Stuart?
Well, from what I've seen so far, I think he's going to make an excellent king, actually. It looks as though he understands what has to be done, and he's got the sort of looks for it, he's got the gravitas. He seems to know what is needed and to be compassionate, to go to places where there have been terrible tragedies. And I think he and his wife, the Queen Consort Camilla, I think they'll do the job very well indeed.
Now, you live very close to Sandringham. What's the response been up there? Because the Queen, of course, a very much loved figure.
Well, I haven't actually been up to the gates. Apparently, people have been up there and left flowers. I live about 10 miles from it. Again, I'm sorry if it seemed to be sort of flippant, but I'm a great fan of the Queen, and I just thought she played a blinder. She knew 2 months ago there was going to be a new Prime Minister, and she would have to swear him or her in. Yeah. She sort of psyched herself up to do that, and do that properly, and the time came, she did it, and then she just quietly passed away. You couldn't do it better, could you?
It is totally and utterly remarkable.
Yeah.